All right, Algebra 1. Today in our 1-4C notes, what we're adding to our order of operations is the absolute value function. So basically, we're going to start off with a bell ringer by going over what we went over yesterday, plugging in some numbers into the expression, and then simplifying. So follow with me while I go through this one here. So first of all, G is 3, H is -6, so we're going to plug that into all of our parts here. So first step, this is what it looks like. 2 times 3 minus, and then H is -6 squared, and then we have plus 3 times -6. So in the order of operations, if we look inside the parentheses, there's nothing inside the parentheses to simplify, so then we go on to exponents. So we have this -6 squared, and again, like I was talking about before, we don't want to just do the double negative here because we have this exponent that needs to be done first. So we have to just make sure that we're doing that one first. So -6 squared is 36. Okay, so just take a note of that. This -6 squared became 36, and the negative sign came down. So now we're on to our multiplying, and we have two steps of multiplying. We're going to do these left to right. So I'm going to do the 2 times 3 first to give me 6 minus 36 plus, and then 3 times -6 will be done in the next step. That's -18. So I have 6 minus 36 minus 18, and then I entered that all in my calculator and got a -48. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about absolute value first before we do some simplifying with it. So first of all, the absolute value, this is the distance that a number is away from 0 on your number line. So we can't have negative numbers here because there's no such thing as a negative distance, right? So if a number is like 3 units to the left, like a -3, it's a distance of 3 away from 0. That means that it would be 3. So that's why absolute values, we don't have any negative numbers from inside the absolute value. But one thing you have to keep in mind here is that just because you have a negative, or just because you have an absolute value, this does not mean that your answer can't be negative, and you'll see that in some of these examples here. So, all right, so let's go through a couple of these here just to show you the absolute values here. Now, if you look at your order of operations, the parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract, none of those say absolute values. So when are these done? And the answer is they're done at the same time as parentheses. So if I have the absolute value of -8 minus 2, this will be done the same time as parentheses. So inside the parentheses, I'm going to subtract these. So -8 minus 2 would give me a -10. And then the absolute value of -10, this is asking you how far is -10 away from 0, and that is 10 units. Okay, so that answer there would be 10. Okay, on the next one here, I have this one done out, so just follow through here. Again, inside your parentheses, the first thing that we can do is this 2 times 6. So 2 times 6 gives you 12. So I have 9 minus 12 inside that first set of absolute values, and then plus 7 inside the second absolute values. Now, you can do right here in this first step, because 7 is already positive, you can basically just get rid of those absolute values right there, but I'm going to do those all at the same step, so I'll do that later. Next, inside this first set of absolute values here, 9 minus 12 is -3, so that's my next step. 9 minus 12 is -3. And then next, this is where I'm getting rid of my absolute values. So the absolute value of -3 is just 3, and the absolute value of 7 is 7. So we're not combining these together and saying -3 plus 7 is 4, and then doing absolute value of 4, because they are in separate absolute values. So we have to look at this one first to get 3, and this one separately to get 7. So I have 3 plus 7, which just gives me 10. All right, so let's go through this one here together. So first of all, I'm using A and C. So A is -2. I'm not even going to worry about B in this problem because it's not being used in my problem. But A is -2, and B is, B is 3.5, but we don't care about that. C is -4. So up here, we have absolute value of A minus C, absolute value there. I'll fill in numbers here in a second. I'm just filling in all the extra stuff that we don't change. So first of all, A is -2. So I have a -2 right here for A, and then C is a -4. So -4, and I'll put a -4 over here also. All right, so since the -2 minus a -4, since that minus a -4, there's no exponent here with this -4. I can do my double negatives right here. So I can change this to a positive, this to a positive. So I'm left with the absolute value of -2 plus 4. You don't have to rewrite this in a separate step. I'm just doing that to show you what's happening there. Now, what you don't want to do is change this double negative right here, and this is why I added this problem in here. You don't want to change this double negative to a positive because this -4 will already become a +4 because it's in an absolute value. So do not change this double negative to a positive. That only happens when you have that next to a parenthesis, not next to an absolute value. So keep that in mind. We don't want to make that mistake. All right, so first set of absolute values, -2 plus 4 is 2, minus, second one is -4. And in this step, this is where I'm getting rid of my absolute values. The absolute value of 2 is 2, and the absolute value of 4 is, -4 is 4. When we subtract these, we get our final answer of -2. So like I said in that one slide, just because we're dealing with absolute values, that does not mean that our answer will always be positive. And right here's a good example. Our answer was a negative, and we dealt with absolute values throughout this problem. All right, next one. In this problem, we're only using A and B. We are not using C, so I'm not going to underline that one at all. So here we go. Plug them in. Here's your first step of plugging them in. A is -2. B is 3.5. So all I did here was I brought down the absolute value of -2. 2 times 3.5 is 7. Then I got rid of my absolute values. The absolute value of -2 is 2, and the absolute value of 7 is 7. Now I'm ready to add them together. 2 plus 7 is 9. Final answer. All right, this one. Let's do this one here. N is 2. I'm not going to make it a different color because we only have one number that we're plugging in. So I don't need to, designate a different color for any of the numbers or anything like that because there's only one number that we're plugging in here. As soon as I can get this board to work, I can start writing here. Okay, so first up, 3, absolute value N is 2. So we have 2 minus 4. So again, I'm going to simplify inside the absolute values. So I'm going to take 2 minus 4 and get -2. All right, now the 3 outside here is being multiplied, but I'm not going to do 3 times -2 because I need to simplify that absolute value first. So that's just going to give me a +2, so 3 times 2. Final answer here is 6. Okay, last one here. Again, all we're doing is plugging in 2. So first step, plug 2 in. I made it a little different because there's 2 2's here, so I wanted it to stand out a little bit. So N I made 2, I made it red, so that red 2 there is the N. All right, so 2 times 2 plus 9, we got a bunch of stuff going on here. But again, absolute values, we treat them just like parentheses. So inside the parentheses, the first thing that I'm going to do is my 2 times 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. Still working inside the absolute values, we need to clean that up. 4 plus 9 gives me 13, so I have the absolute value of 13. Okay, absolute value of 13. Now, the absolute value of 13 is just 13. You don't have to show a separate step for this, but what I did was I just replaced them with parentheses just to show that we are going to multiply these. But you could just say -3 times 13 since that's already positive. You don't need to rewrite that like I did, but I just wanted to show you what was happening. So -3 times 13 is -39. Last step, add that 10 to get your final answer of -29. And again, just because we're dealing with absolute values doesn't mean that our final answer must be positive. What it means is that this stuff here inside the parentheses, inside the absolute values, this stuff has to be positive. This right here has to be positive. But because we had this negative out front here, our overall answer ended up being a negative. So just because there's an absolute value, your final answer could still be negative. So again, if you had any questions on any of these, go back through and rewatch them. And if there were any problems, just let me know, and we can go over them in class.